Okay, so right now we have this repo. This repo is actually set up. Let me try to find it here. So this is what we ended up just doing before. Let me make this kind of bigger. So right now, one of the things you see here is that there's only one branch. So let's assume that someone ends up giving me a task, and this is our company, WikiStack, and someone says, hey, look, we've got no testing. Could you at least set up the basis for testing our application? Now, one of the things that you'll find out is that it's never good practice to work off of your master branch. It's kind of frowned upon. And the reason for that is that, if you end up doing that and then you have to go back and you want to pull those changes off, it becomes a little bit trickier to pull off. So what's done instead is that there's basically a feature branch that's created in Git. So let me show you what that means. I'm going to go, so basically this is my repo. If you forked your repository, right, what you could end up doing is that it's now your repository, you could end up cloning it, and you can make whatever changes you want to it. So what I'm going to do here is, if I look over here and I say git.branch, okay, it'll show me the only branch that I have is this master branch. But what I'm going to do here, and there's a couple of different ways to do this, and usually this can be done in 2 steps. I tend to do it in 1 step. Git checkout branch, okay? And what this is going to end up doing is it's going to end up creating a branch. And I'm going to call this branch setup test framework. Now you'll see I'm on a different branch. If I go over here and I say git.branch, it'll show me the branch that I'm on, okay? And I could make changes to this branch if I want to. I could also go back. So what kind of change could I make to my branch? Well, let's make a couple of changes. I know that if I'm going to add testing, there's 2 libraries that I'm going to need. I'm going to need Mocha, and I'm going to need Chai. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say npm install Mocha, Chai, save dev. So this should go out and get Mocha, and it should get Chai. Now the only thing that I have a default configuration file, so my node modules are never included in my repos. But if I was to go over here and now look at the status and say git.status, it would show me that my package JSON file has changed. So a couple of commands you want to definitely get familiar with is to git checkout -b, the name of the branch you want to check out. And if I was to go over here, I could say git.diff. This will tell me what's changed. And I've added some dependencies here. I've added my Chai, and I've added my Mocha.
What was the dev that you added to the site when you first took the branch? You did dash save dash dev.
I didn't think I did dash dev. I thought I just did save. Maybe I did dev. Maybe I did. Okay. So what this ends up doing is that dash dev changes it as a dev dependency. Usually when you're doing your testing, these modules are not important in terms of the running of your application, but they're important in the testing of your application. Sometimes I'll actually just save them. Save as dev will sort of save them in a separate spot. So when I deploy to Heroku, I don't need those dependencies. I don't need those to run, but I need them to write my tests. Good call. So what I want to do here is, first of all, if I just ended up making this change and I said, oh man, you know what, I want to get back to my master branch, I could check out. I don't do -b. I just say, hey, look, I want to get back to my master branch. Okay? And it'll switch me back to my master branch. Right? Now I could see that this change is still here. Okay? And I could, again, go back to my other branch, set up test framework, and I could end up going back here. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to commit this. So I'm on this other branch, and I'm going to say git.add.git.commit added Mocha and chai. Okay? And now I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say git.push, and I want to go up to my origin, and I want to push this branch. So now I'm going to push this up. If I go back here, I'll see now, if I reload this, I've now got 2 branches. Okay? And in fact, you can see that I've got 2 branches. If I go back here and I look at this branch, by the way, it's actually telling me, hey, look, do you want to do a pull request? And why pull request? What this is really saying when you say you want to do a pull request is that when you end up doing a branch, think about a tree. The branch is going out away from your main trunk. Pull request says, do you want to get that branch pulled in? Do you want it to be part of your main branch? Just to sort of show you something, if I go back locally, I'm on this branch. If I go over here and I say git.checkout master, and I go over here and I'll do a cat of my package.json, notice you don't see the Mocha and the chai. Okay? But if I go and I check out again my setup test framework, and I cat, which is just a way of looking at the file, my package.json, now you'll see it's here. Okay? So again, I created this branch. Okay? So this branch is on my machine. I did end up pushing it up as well if I wanted someone else to take a look at it. Now, more often than not, you're not working on the same branch as someone else. You could be, but that tends to be a little complicated. That's something for another day. For the most part, you're going to work on your branch, and you're going to eventually want to get it into the master branch. So let's start setting up testing. Let's see what that's going to look like. So what do we need to set up testing? Let's actually do it. Notice here, this is saying, do you want to load this? Because I switched my branch. So I'm going to go back to my server. And I'm going to start, my package.json. I'm going to start setting up testing. And I'm going to, again, set up testing in a dev environment. Because I might also, just the same way that you deploy your site, there's also sites that you could actually tell them, hey, look, every time that I end up making a change to GitHub, run my tests, okay? This is for running my tests locally, the same way that I'm starting things locally. And at some point, I'll show you how these other sites work. They're called continuous integration sites. If you've heard of sites like Circle CI is a big one. There's one that's very, Travis is the real big one that's out there. I think we use Travis at work. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to specify, now again, I want to use a different database for my testing. So for my testing, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to change my database, and this is going to be test. And I'm going to specify nodemon, and here I'm going to do nodemon, but I'm going to do node modules, Mocha, bin, Mocha. So what that's going to do when I go and run that, and again, if I go over here and I say git.status, I'll see that I made that change. If I do a git.diff, I can see the change that I made. It tells me what lines I took out, what lines I put in. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say npm run test dev. And what should happen is I should get an error that says, that's great, but you have no tests. So let's go and set a test. Now, the nice thing about this is that we've got our data, a way to seed our data. So why don't we go in, and what we can end up doing here is we're going to end up syncing our data or seeding our data. And after we end up seeding our data, we will run some tests. So what are we doing? We're seeding with one user And 2 users and what? 3 stories, right? Is that right? Or 4 stories? 3.
You are the 4 one. So it's 2 from each and 2 for...
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. So let's go over here, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a test folder. I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to differentiate between my model tests and my what are called my routing tests. Remember I told you model tests are pretty easy to set up? That's what you're going to end up seeing here. And so here I'm going to say models.test.js. How am I going to start out with this? Well, first I'm going to bring in expect require chai.expect. I'm going to need my DB, right, my models. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say const db equals require /db. Right, this actually has all my models. And as a first cut over here, I'm going to say I'm going to describe my models. And I'm going to describe, I could describe each of these separate. I'm going to describe my user model. And what's my test going to be? I always like to do something like it exists, right? Very simple test. So what am I going to do? I'm going to say expect db models user. For existence, try allows us to just do something like to be okay. That's a way of saying, is it truthy? Okay? So this test should actually run. It says it can't find Mocha, and the reason why that's happening is that it's not node module, it's node module. So I'm going to have to just do that. Now again, anytime I end up making a change to my package JSON, I've got to start over again. And it'll run this test, and this test will end up passing. And look, nothing would be wrong with going in here and saying git.add dot, git.commit, my first test, okay? And I could even go and push this. I'm on this branch. I think I could just do git.push from this branch, if I'm not mistaken. And that should end up pushing up here. And if I went back here, it's going to see less than a minute ago. If I do a compare here, it'll show me, hey, look, these are the things that you ended up doing. Here's your dev dependency, and here's the code that I just ended up putting in, okay? Let me get my testing set up, and then I will actually pull this into my main branch. So let me go back here, and let's do some more rigorous tests here. Just for the sake of argument, we want our database to be in the same spot between every test. So it's not uncommon to do a before each. And what we want to do for our before each is we want to go and we want to seed our database, okay? Seeding your database is an asynchronous operation. So we don't want to run our tests until are done. We've got something that's going to take a while. So what we're allowed to do is to pass in a parameter. And if this is passed in, what will happen here is that if I do my test, I'm going to time out. The reason why I time out is that what ends up happening is Mocha knows that they've passed me a function because I've asked for a function, and they're waiting for that function to be called. If I went back here and did that, my test would pass again. But what I really want to do here is I actually want to sync my database, actually seed my database. So I'm going to say db.seed, put a then here, and when I'm done, I'm going to call done, and just in case I have an error, I'm going to do a catch with E and call done with the error. So now if I run this, let's just see what happens. Okay? Different error, but I see what the error is. That database doesn't exist, so let's go and create it. Not uncommon to have a different database for testing. And now I just need to say create database. Now I'll have a database. And if I go back here, let's do something a little bit more interesting here. So we'll say user, it exists. And let's describe our seeded data. And how many users do we have? We're going to have 2 users, right? So I'm going to go over here and say there are 2 users. Now, if I wanted to just get this to pass right off the bat, we're going to have some expectation. Expect users.length to equal 2. And let's just fake it passing by going over here and saying users equals 1, 2. So I'm in user, I'm describing the seeded data for users. If I go back here, I'm back in business, and I see that I have 2 users. Now, that's not really how I want to test this. The way that I want to test this, a common way to do this, is that not only can you put something in your before block, which is fine, you could also put it in your it block as well. So once I do this, I'm going to run into the same boat that I ran into before, where it's going to time out, and it's going to tell me, hey, look, you passed the done to it, and nothing happened. But what I really want to do, instead of doing this, I want to specify, hey, look, dbModels.user, find all. Then I should get back some users. I'm going to give this an underscore. And when I go in here, I'm going to specify that users equals underscore users. And then I'll separate this out by going in here and saying, what do I expect at this point? Actually, let me do one other thing here. So what I can do here, I'm gonna put this in a before block, I think, which makes more sense. But I'm gonna go over here and specify that at this point, I'm gonna be done. So what should happen here is that even though the testing framework is going to encounter this line, it's not going to run it until I end up calling done up here. It's going to realize there's an expectation, but it's not going to run it yet. So if I go back here, cannot read property length of undefined, users equals users. Let me do one other thing here. Sorry about that. Let's try it one other way, which I think is going to be a little bit more readable. Let's move this up here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put outside of this users. I'm going to do it before each. And this way, this will be should be a lot easier to read. Users.length. I'm going to get rid of my done here. And so what should happen here is that if I say DB models find all, user, I'm going to get a collection of users. I'm going to assign underscore users to my users up here. And I'm going to call done. And just to be safe, if in fact there's an error here, I don't want to have unhandled exceptions, so I'll call done with this error. And let's just see. Those 2 things end up passing. We always want to go red first in the right way. Let's pretend that we expect to have 3 users. And this ends up failing, right? Because we expected 3, we really have 2. So I'm going to change this to 2. Let's also go back and do another test. We're going to describe story. So it's important to note that this before each is going to apply to every test that we end up running. Might seem like a pretty big headache, but syncing the database is pretty fast. And you really don't want to have test pollution. So you really want your database to be in the state that you're expecting. And that's why we're running this every time. I'm going to go over here. And for story, I'm going to describe seeded data. Story's a little bit different, right? For story, what do we expect? There are 4 stories. So we'll go over here, we'll say expect stories.length to equal 4. And now when we end up doing that, this is going to end up failing. Okay? By the way, Mocha lets you do some interesting things. If you just wanted to run one test and you didn't want all that noise from the other test, Mocha lets you tack on only. And now it'll just run that test, which is nice. Right? If you just didn't want to deal with a lot of other noise here, we could always take that out. I'm going to do a before each, passing and a done, because this is going to be asynchronous. I'm going to go over here and say let stories, because this is something that's going to change. And before each, I'll say db model story find all. Then stories equals stories. Then run the test. I'm done. Just in case there's an error, catch. Done with the error. So for my seeded data, I expect to have 4 stories. And those end up passing as well. So at this point, I actually have some testing set up with my framework. Let me go in and commit it, push it up, and let me merge it. So I'm going to go up here, git.status, added some seed tests. Git.push, I'm going to push this. Now what this is going to allow me to do is now once I go up to GitHub, I'm going to go over here and it says compare and make a pull request. And so again, for the terminology, right, the way to think about it is that the reason why you have a branch is eventually you want to make it to the big show, you want to get into the master branch, you want someone to pull it in for you, or you want to pull it in. So I could do a pull request, and usually you go, I set up the test framework. By the way, a lot of places no one writes anything for this stuff. Know your audience. This shows you my commits on this branch, and I'm going to say create the pull request. I'm going to go back over here, okay? And it says, hey, look, there's no conflicts. This works out okay. Someone else could go and write some notes. This is great, or this stinks. Whatever they want to do here, go in and comment. Maybe they'll ask you to write some tests, although that doesn't really make much sense for us here because the whole branch is testing. Now, once this is done, I can merge the pull request. Now, keep in mind, I'm merging this up at the origin, okay? So even though it's my change, and I confirm it, and in fact, once you end up merging a branch and it gets merged, you're done with that branch. There's nothing really left to do. That's why you have this big delete branch here. You're done with it, it's merged in. You could delete it. A lot of times people don't. At some point they will, because they're going to have too many branches and it's going to get a little bit annoying to look at. But once this is done, I could go back Over here, this is now merged in. Notice now when I look at my commits on my master branch, I've got all these other commits. My first test, here are some tests, and this is the merging of those. So that ends up going in as well. Now, if I end up coming back here locally, and I say git checkout master, it'll let me do that. Okay? It thinks that I'm up to date, but if I was to go up here and open this up, notice I have all these red lines here. If I actually go over here and I look at my package JSON, notice it doesn't reflect what's up on the server. So if you're working with someone else, they made a change to the master branch, you want to pull that down, all you need to do is you're on the master branch now, git.pull. Okay? You basically want to pull into your local copy, okay, what's up on the origin. And it's telling you what is getting pulled in, the changes that were made, right? If I end up now going back here, I'll see that this is going to reflect what's up on the master branch.
So you do it, you push your branch to the origin, so to GitHub.
Mhm.
You don't merge it on your
You could if you want to, but for starters, let's do it this way, okay? For starters, let's not have multiple people working on the same branches. Let's keep these separate, right? For now, let's merge it up on GitHub and just make sure we pull to get the latest copy. Evan, did you have a question?
So a little bit ago, you merged in your branch and then deleted that branch.
Mm-hmm.
And when you went back to your terminal, you checked out master. Before you did that, what branch did it think you were on?
Locally, it's going to keep, for me, locally, if I say git.branch, my branch is here. There is some command that allows you to basically do pruning, get it, trees, pruning, branches, pruning, and basically say, hey, look, if it's gone up on the origin, just get rid of it here. I don't know those commands offhand. They're not that important. So you have a bunch of branches lying around. Who cares? Okay. My feeling is that locally, who cares? Push stuff early, push it often, right? Get your branches up there. Think about that you could just totally locally wipe out your directory and just go and clone it again, and you'll be in the exact same spot.
How do you resolve a conflict? So you and I are working on the same thing. You decide to push your stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
I then push my stuff up, but because you went first, there's going to be like an out of sync. How do we merge that?
Well, first of all, let's assume that we're going to do all our merging on the server. Let's right now just do one branch at a time, and we'll talk about merging conflicts, at some point. Again, when you're working, we'll get to that. It's a little bit more complicated, but this is sort of a starting point for this. But I also want to talk a little bit about doing some testing. So let's go back and let's say that I'm going to do another branch here. And I'm going to say git.checkout. So now the branch, this is now set up, and someone says, hey, we want you to do some route tests. So I'm going to do a test to see that I can, read my home page and that my home page shows the various stories that are on there. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say checkout -b. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to say test homepage route. Now I've got a new branch, and in order to do this, I'm going to have to do a little bit of an architecture change here. And one of the things that I am going to propose that we do, and this is also pretty common, is we're going to break our server up so that our server is going to be very simple, and we're going to have another file here. And what I'm going to start out with doing is I'm going to copy this file, and I'm going to rename it app. So now I've got server and I've got app. And app is going to have all of our logic except one thing. It's not going to start the server. Okay? App is going to have everything except starting the server. So all this stuff is totally fine. Okay? I should rephrase it. It's going to have everything except starting the server and also seeding as well. Now, the only thing that I'm going to do here is that when I create my Express app, I'm going to export it. This is my app. This is my Express app that I want to go and export. Does everyone realize that I could put this on this line? This is not a return that's here. This is just saying the object that's getting exported. I could add things to it after the fact. Doesn't matter. It's an object. And I'm going to go down here. And I'm going to take all this stuff here, these three things. And I'm going to go to my server. And I'm going to paste these three things in. Actually, I could have done it differently. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is that I'm actually going to go, and what I can do with Express is I can create a server. Again, don't forget, Express is actually written on top of HTTP. And what I could do is I could require HTTP, and HTTP allows me to create a server. And all that HTTP has to get, one of the things that I could give HTTP is a routing pipeline. And I get my routing pipeline by going in here and saying require /app. Now I've got a server, but it's a server that's still not listening. Bad server. Okay? And I'm going to say to my server, hey server, same way that we tell Express to listen, server, I want you to listen on this port. In fact, we could just do this. Listen on this port. And since I have DB in here, I'm going to say const DB equals require /DB. Now, this is an architectural change. Let's make sure that our local site is still working. So I'm just going to go over here. And I might even be up here already. Yeah, I'm actually running already. So if I go to localhost 3000, I know that I didn't end up breaking anything. So again, it's kind of a minor change, but what I'm getting at here is that we don't need to, when we're running tests, we don't need to start our server, okay? We're going to use something called supertest, which is going to create a server, and it's going to listen for requests and responses, okay? So all we did is we separated out our Express app. Still has just about everything in it. The only thing that we didn't keep in here is just 3 or 4 lines of code where we actually start up the server, and also where we're seeding the data. We don't need to, we're only going to seed the data when our server ends up starting up. In our testing environment, I don't feel like seeding the data twice. So what am I going to do here now? So at this point, we could go in here. And I could go here and get.status, get.add, get.commit, separated out app from server. I could push it. Push early, push often, everything's up to date. The reason why that's happening, I think our first push, in order to do this, the reason why it's not going up is that when I say push, there's no branch that's up there. So you do have to, when you first push your branch, you have to say, hey, look, I want to push to the origin, test homepage, route. Now that'll end up getting pushed. And now every time that I do a push, that'll be up there. You could take my word for it, or if we go up here, we'll see that this is actually up here as well. Now what I want to do is I want to test my home page. So I'm going to modify this. This is going to be my routes test.js. And there's a module that I'm going to need here. npm install supertest. Again, this is just for my testing environment. So I'm going to say save dev. I'm going to go over here for my routes test. I'm going to again, still need my expect. I'm still going to need my DB. And I'm going to also need some sort of client that's going to be able to make requests. So let's be very optimistic. Let's talk about what would be great to have. Let's say that, what are we going to describe? Well, again, I'm putting this all in one spot. We're going to describe our routes. And let's also, just to keep things simple, let's describe, with seeded data. And we'll go over here, and before each of these tests, let's describe, we're going to describe our get/route. Well, wouldn't it be great if we could have something like a client and tell that client to get the /route and say, hey, look, we expect from this /route to have a status code of 200 at a minimum. We also want to do, I forgot how I did this before. We're going to do a then, and we're actually going to get our result, right? And we'll go over here and we'll say, well, what do we expect with our result? And we could do something like expect result.text to contain, we know there's a foo in there somewhere, right? Now, this is going to be something that's going to be asynchronous. So we're going to end up passing this in a done, and we'll specify done. And if in fact we have an error, we'll call done with the error.
Can you just do done?
No. You want to know why?
Why?
I don't know. Try it. It's not going to work. It should work. It doesn't work. There's a circular dependency error that you get. Okay, so once I do this, you'll see that I get this error. Client is not defined. Okay? Well, supertest allows me to go over here and say const client require supertest. Supertest is like a testing server. That's what it is. All it needs is an application to run. I go up one level, and I get my Express app. Looks like it passed. Let's make sure, right? Sometimes it feels like things are passing and they're not. Let's see if this contains fudge. Okay? That's not a great sign. Okay. Let's see what's happening here. Oh, you know why this is happening? I didn't put this. This is a mistake I make sometimes. I didn't put it in the it block. So I really need to do this. It contains my stories. Or it contains stories. Move that over, and let's actually put the done where it belongs. And now that there's an it here, no. Expect 200. Let's see.
Watch, look in console, see what's going on.
Let's see something. There are 4 stories. Is it even picking up this test? No, I know why. Ooh, that was bad.
Because we were not testing.
That was bad. That's something you got to be careful of. By the way, someone will chew you out for that. I mean, I basically, if someone had gone in later on, they would think all their tests were, and I've done this before. Can't believe I'm saying this on a hot mic.
What did you just change?
Only. It was only running that one test,
Right. Yeah.
right? I expect this to contain my storage. See, it's giving me all my HTML. I know it's not pretty. Okay. There, again, we're doing a fairly rudimentary test here. Let's go over here and, yeah, so that only was definitely not a good thing. I had a couple of different things going on that were problematic.
So you actually put this in between your 2.js files, so that it's really capturing information in between.
Yeah, I mean, the way that test server is working, the test server behind the scenes is loading that page. It's waiting for the response, okay? And it's analyzing the response, right? It's like a middleman that's sitting there.
So you need the whole application, and this is testing in the middle,
This is testing the application.
in between the page.
It's testing a request and a response. So now, this should end up passing. You know, we could do some more detailed tests here. I mean, we could also go over here and say, describe, get foods. It's a silly test, but I could go over here and say, it returns a 404. So again, I'm going to do my client, do a get, slash, expect. Let's get it to break first. I'm going to say that I expect the 200. And I'll say then. I'm going to put a done in here, and I'm going to do my catch. And I'll go over here and put this in. So this should end up passing, right? Because it's basically the same test I did before. Okay, but let's change it. We'll go in here and we'll say if we end up doing that. Expected 200, got a 404. Let's go over here and say we really expect a 404. Silly example, right? But the test does pass. Now, look, there's all kinds of things you could do. If we went over here, let's do one more request. Let's just look at our data for a second. So if we look at our seeded data on our routes, on our model, we go over here. This is, let's see. So we've got Mitch has a bunch of has a Baz, right? That means if you end up going to my page, you should not see Baz, right? So let's test that out. So what are we going to test out? Describe, get, slash, prof. Could write down our expectation. No Baz. So we'll go over here, and we've got our client. Our client, by the way, can do posts and deletes and all that stuff. We're going to do a get slash prof. We're going to expect a 200. Okay. We're going to do a then, which will give us our result. Okay. And we'll write our expectation, expect result dot text not to contain Baz. We'll do it then. Done. Catch. E. Done. E. I know, Mitch, you're going to try this to just put the done in there. It's all right. Go ahead. Not going to bother me. Maybe they fix something. So when I end up doing that, I don't want that. Let's take a look, see if that passes. Okay. Expected 200, got a 404. That's right, because it's a bad request, right? It's not prof, it's users. Okay, that passes, but you know, you always want to get a little bit of a red in here. So let's make it fail, and we'll put in foo. And that fails, right? We expected it not to contain something, but it did contain something. So we'll go back in, we'll put in Baz, and just for the sake of argument, we could actually, well, I mean, if we wanted to, we could write multiple tests in here. Nothing would prevent us from doing that. And we could go over here and we expect result.test. Let's get it to fail first, not to contain foo. That breaks, and we'll say, no, it's actually going to contain foo. Okay? So that's, I think, a good intro into testing. Again, just think about something for a second. You know what made our life so much easier? That we had that ability to see data in our application. So easily, we could just go like that and get some data in our application. Let's make this change. Testing users route, git.push. Now, since it knows that it's up there, it'll end up pushing this. So you asked the question of if you wanted to merge on your local machine. You could do that as well. In which case, the thing is, you probably do want to have some kind of, pull request here. But if you wanted to, nothing would really prevent you from, if you're running things locally, is to go in here and go check out master, and going over here and saying git.merge test homepage route. Now merged in here, and now I could push this up. Let's see if it did that. So let's go over here. Let's just make sure that that's there. Testing users route, so everything is really up there. I think the reason why it didn't give me all that much information is because it already had it up there.
You still had two branches up on Git, because you didn't merge them there.
I didn't merge it there, and right now, this would be totally legitimate to go in here. I'm not saying don't delete other people's branches, but if you want to delete your own branches, go ahead. I mean, test homepage. This is default branch.
So one way or another, you're going to have to delete a branch, whether it be on your local machine or on.
You don't have to, and some people never do. It just is, things get ugly after a while, and you go up there and you look. I mean, you just see branches that are just out there. People start working on something, and the fact is, they stop working on them. Maybe they'll be like, I'm going to get back to that. But, maybe they will. And there's something, that's something there. The problem is eventually, like, someone will say, oh, yeah, you worked on that a while back. And, you're like, oh, yeah, I did. And, you go back and things have changed so much, you have no idea what's happening on that branch. It's diverged so much from anything else. So this was a sort of basic introduction. And we'll talk about the workshop in a sec. Let me stop this recording.